Hello, today I'm going to be speaking to Luke Staton, who's a former England youth and Blackburn footballer. How's it going, Luke?
Very well, thank you, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Obviously, I'm really intrigued to hear your story. I know you're doing great things. A lot of it's on social media, which we'll touch on later on. Obviously, I do want to let people know what you're doing as well, because I think you are really doing amazing stuff. How's life at the minute? Like, kind of, how are you in general?
I'm really well, Danny, and I have that mindset that, and it may sound a bit cheesy this to some people, and maybe it would have felt cheesy and sounded cheesy to me back in the day many years ago. But seriously, though, every single day that I wake up, I feel like I've got an opportunity to do something. And what I mean by that is that from having a short-lived sporting career, knowing how fast life can change and meeting lots of people that 1 minute here and the next minute aren't. I think as you get older and a little bit wiser, you start to be very grateful. Just being able to wake up is a great thing. And at first, when you say that, you don't really feel it or you don't believe it because it sounds like, yeah, cool, come on. But actually, every single day that I wake up and I say it to myself is I've got an opportunity today to do something that means something.
Yeah.
And I've become so driven by that I feel, even when, yes, like at the moment, I'm training for a 100-mile ultra run that's coming in September. I'm 24 weeks out of it. I'm doing more talks and more work than possibly I've ever done. And my children have got more commitments too. And sometimes, very rare, I think, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing all of this stuff? However, it's kind of, I have that real feeling inside that I have no idea, neither does nobody else, of how long we're going to be here. So I want to do everything that I can in the time that I've got. And my days are kind of, for some people, they look at it and go, I just would not want a day like that. And I look at it and go, I love that day because my day is my choice. My day is something I love. Yeah. I'm not going to work like I had to once upon a time when my football career was over and the next minute I was on a building site carrying bricks and working in an animal food factory where, yes, I wasn't as enthusiastic about my day back then, that's for sure. But now I'm doing something that I really enjoy and I love.
Yeah.
Waking up in the morning knowing I'm healthy enough and well enough and got enough energy to do something that I'm passionate about is a real gift. And I hold on to that at times where I may slip into lack of appreciation because things might not be going as well as you want to, which is like that in life for all of us. Like today, I shared with you prior to this, I've driven nearly 2 hours this morning to do a full day of talks in a school for nearly 1,000 young people on the UK Inspiring Next Generation tour that I'm doing. As I arrive at the school and I'm starting to get prepped and focused in my mind for what I'm about to do, I get a phone call from my son telling me all his school books are in my car. And all of a sudden, he's like, Dad, I need them for tonight, tomorrow. And I'm like, son, I'm away now for a few days. So now I'm sat here talking to you. It's added a 4-hour journey to my life to go and take my son's school books back. So my point to that is that in that moment, I was like, I can't believe I've got to do that. And then I thought to myself, hold on a minute, Luke. You've got a great day here working with lots of young people, with some entrepreneurs that are joining me for these talks, that have funded the talks, that have joined me. And then I'm going to have the opportunity now to drive over and see my son and give him his school books, which I wouldn't have had if I'd have given him this morning. Yeah. So I try and flip things. And although it was hard, Danny, in that moment to talk to myself in that way, you have no choice, I believe, to talk to yourself in that manner, because if I go into the school holding on to the crikey now, I've got another 4 hours at the end of this day, I've got to be there tomorrow. How am I going to fit it in? I wouldn't have delivered in the way that we did today. Yeah. So in that moment, I guess I've just learned the ability to go, do you know what? It's okay. Like, I'll get to see my son later. I'll take his books. I'll find a way. And we always do find a way. So the answer to your question, Danny, is I'm very grateful and appreciative of being healthy and well enough to pursue the passions that I've got.
Mate, that's amazing. That's like a great perspective to have. And like you said there, it's always, we get thrown these situations and some of them are good and some of them aren't and indifferent. And then sometimes it's easy to look at it in a negative way, but sometimes all you need is to spin it on its head, and then it gives you a different perspective on it. So that's massive, and I obviously appreciate you obviously letting us know about how you kind of attack your day to day. Talk to me about kind of what you do nowadays. What is your typical day or your typical week?
There is no typical day or typical week, and I think that I really enjoy that. From being from a sporting background, it's very regimented, and your days was, driven by be here, be there on a certain time. And since football ended for me a very, very long time ago, I've always wanted that flexibility in my life to be able to spend time with people, to be able to do the work that I want to do. And I think that's why I became my own boss, really, because I wanted the freedom and flexibility to go where I want, meet the people I wanted to meet. And I always felt in football that although I believe I'm accountable for how well I did at times and how well I didn't do at times, I'm totally responsible for that. I always felt in sport, your destiny was sometimes out of your hands. So no matter how well you did, if that manager didn't want you, then he didn't want you. No matter how well you did, if you wasn't his choice, and that's their choice. And when I came out of football, I thought, I'm not going to have that again. I'm going to make sure that however well I do or don't do, it is totally down to me. It's not somebody else saying to me, Luke, you are good enough or you aren't good enough. Because in sport, you go through 1 minute you're great, the next minute you're not great, and you're being released from another football club, and you've got to overcome that, which is just part of the game. When I came out of sport, one of my commitments to myself was, I want to be in control of that. I want to be able to give my life all that I've got, and I'll reap the rewards. I'll be able to help people. I just want to give to the world as much as I can. If I'm my own boss, I can choose how I do it. And if it doesn't work, then I've just got to look in the mirror. And if it does work, also, I've been a big part of that too. So I think my life at the moment, Danny, is literally every day I'm somewhere different, working with either young people in schools as part of the Inspiring the Next Generation project, where I've worked with nearly 100,000 people over the last eight years. And we're going to work with another 30,000 young people over 2022 to empower them to fulfill their dreams. We're doing a tour at the moment where we'll reach 30,000 people in 30 days across 30 different schools. The days aren't back to back, they're spread out. So my days are in between that, and I also work in the business world too. So I'm a shareholder in 2 different companies, so I work with them on a regular basis. I also work as delivering leadership programs, personal development programs to organizations, to senior leaders, to the managers. I do some one-to-one coaching with different individuals too. I'm the coach of my son's football team. I've just signed up to do a 100-mile marathon in September, where my goal is to raise £10,000 for Dreams Come True charity for young people too. So you can see there's a lot of stuff in there. And so each day is different because I'm somewhere different with someone different. So although I'm often delivering the similar outcome, which is to help that person or that group in front of me in whichever way that is. If it's a school, I might be doing mentoring, I might be doing motivational talks, I might be delivering 6-week programs within education. Within businesses, it might be 12-month-long programs. So I go from the next generation into the corporate business world, and then back to the next generation again, and then with my own children, helping them do what they want to do. So my life is kind of so varied, which I love. And sometimes I leave home and I run out of clothes because I haven't calculated well enough. Actually, by that day, there's no point me traveling home just to get home at midnight to leave at 6 a.m. I might as well stay somewhere else. And I'm very fortunate. I have a real supporting family and friendship group that enable me to do that. And my children, no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, I'm at their clubs, and I do pickups, I do drop-offs, and I'm at their football matches, I'm at their football training, I'm at their, lessons. Wherever they need me to be, I'm there, and I love to be there. So lots of people think because I'm all over the country doing what I do, that there must be a sacrifice. And there isn't really a sacrifice of anybody else. So if you said to my children, your dad travels around a lot, they would be none the wiser because they see me so much. Like, they see me so much, they wouldn't know. Some people work away for 2 weeks. I work away every day, but they still see me all the time because I'm prepared to do that extra car journey to pick my son up at 8 o'clock at night from gymnastics, to take him home just to see him for that 30-minute window and have that conversation. So the only sacrifice is sometimes that I get tired, but you know, if getting tired is the only sacrifice I've got from doing what I love all the time, then I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Obviously, it sounds like you are doing a lot of stuff, but you've also got that time there where you kind of, you haven't negated your kids, if that makes sense. So that, I always think, for me, it's always important to be present in your kids' lives, because they'll never forget that. I always look back at my parents, and I was speaking about it the other day to my wife, and I was like, I always remember my mum and dad just being together and always just being there. And it doesn't matter where we were, they were just always there. So, and I'll never forget that. And I'm nearly 41. So yeah, that's massive. For me, obviously, I know you played football, and you said you stopped playing football a long time ago. So talk to me about your transition process. Like, what was the situation that led you to retirement?
Well, a young person asked me that today. So I spoke to 1,000 young people today, and one of the guys puts his hand up and he asked me that same question. He said, Luke, how come you retired? And I said, well, I didn't retire. Football retired me. Because I didn't retire because I wanted to retire. Football retired me, in a sense that I went from being, you know, at 15, 16, 17 and 18, I was playing for England, and I was always playing. So I was always, more often than not, I was always in the starting 11 for all the England ranks, playing with some of the world's greatest names. And I remember my last game for England, I think out of the 11 that started, I think 9 went on, or 8 went on to become Premier League football players. And one of them was Michael Owen, which obviously went on to fulfill and have an amazing career. And I was one of the ones that actually didn't fulfill their potential. For whatever reason that was, I didn't. So my answer to the young person today and to you was, I went from 15 years of age to 21, and I was engrossed in football. I was a professional football player from the age of 17 to the age of 21, maybe 22, around that era. And I was one of the best in the country, obviously, at 18, because I'm playing for England. So not my reckoning. That if you're playing for England, you can say that you're one of the best in the country because you're playing for England. Whether or not other people's opinions say you are, you're playing for England, so you're at a good level. But I wasn't one of the best players in the world. And I think to break through into the Premier League at that point for me, I had to be one of the best players in the world, and I wasn't. So when I got to like 19, 20, it was kind of going from, right, I've been one of the best players in the country for as long as I can remember. I've got a phenomenal contract, who Blackburn Rovers at the time was the Premier League champions when I joined them. I'm joining the Premier League champions. I've got an incredible contract, a 4-year contract, which is an incredible opportunity for me and my family, because financially it was also very good too. So I'm joining this club full of hope and thinking this is going to be the start of what comes, you know, the real dream, which is to make it in the Premier League and play for England. And as I started to get through my pro contract at Blackburn, yes, I picked up injuries, but so does everybody. And my dad always used to say, if you're good enough, son, you'll make it. If you're not, you won't. So I've always followed that philosophy. I've never been one to make excuses. I just clearly wasn't good enough to go from 18 playing for England to 19, 20, 21 breaking into the first team at Blackburn. And I was a very, very late physical developer. And when I first joined my professional club, it was under the Kenny Dalglish era, and the whole regime used to say, you're not really going to be physically ready until you're 20, 21 to start to look at first team football. But managers change, regime changes, and if you're not ready at that point, you don't maybe get the same nurturing as what you got before. And it's like, if you're not ready at 19, 20, you know, maybe it's time to move on. And when I look back, Danny, I physically wasn't ready at 19, 20 to be playing in the Premier League. I just wasn't. I could have maybe, I believe ability-wise, I had what it took to get involved, not hold a place down, but physically I wouldn't have been able to cope with game after game. But the idea was, mid-20s, I'd probably start to shine through, or 22, 23.
Yeah.
And when the regime changed, Blackburn Rovers released me. They said, you're not going to get in the first team. And I knew that because the players above me was fantastic.
Yeah.
I went to Bolton Wanderers, where I was in the championship squad there. And I loved it there at Bolton Wanderers because it was like a second chance for me. And I believed I grasped my second chance. I was doing really well. I always remember getting a squad number, and I was really proud to get a squad number. It was just an amazing feeling. And I made my debut. For Bolton Wanderers just before the age of 20, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I remember coming on in this game for the last 25 minutes, and it's just one of them things that everything, Danny, just went well for me. Like, I was so nervous, but everything went well. My touch, my passing, I was just felt like I belonged there. I was on fire. Everything went well.
Yeah.
And I just knew it then. After my first few touches, I thought, I'm here now. Come on, Here we go. After the game, I remember being on such a high. Lots of the players went out that night, and I chose not to. I walked out this stadium at Bolton Wanderers, and I sat in my mum and dad's car. My mum and dad, well done, son. Keep doing what you're doing. You're there now. Just keep doing what you're doing. And the next morning, I remember turning up to the training ground. And as I arrived at the training ground, the manager resigned. So he left the night after my debut. And as he left, the next manager came in, and he released me not long after because he didn't feel that I was good enough. So after that release from Bolton Wanderers, it was then like, oh, man, this is happening to me again. I'm so close. I felt I've arrived. And the first team used to say to me, it's just a matter of time now, Luke, and you're in, because we can see what you've got. You're ready. And I felt ready as well, mentally and physically. And my standard, I felt ready. And then Sam Allardyce came in, and he released me. So he released me, and I was like, no problem. That's cool. I was always respectful of people's decisions, didn't blame people. I was just like, that's your opinion. And from there, it was kind of, then I went to Barry Town, where I got to play in the Welsh Premier League, which was one of the most enjoyable chapters of my life ever. Because you think, for someone like me that's gone from, being at a Premier League club to then getting released and released again, I'm now at Barry Town. You're the best team in Wales, and if you win the league, you get to play in the Champions League. Yeah. So I'd gone from living an amazing, illustrious young career to then having the kind of the devastating feeling of being rejected, because I'd never felt rejection all my life as a football player. I'd always got picked. Every club in the country wanted me because I was an England international and I'd not signed a contract. Then all of a sudden you've got to deal with, sorry, son, you're not good enough. We don't want you. And it's like, okay, how do I respond to this? Because I've not been here before. I didn't have the coping strategy. I didn't know what to do. I felt angry. I was upset by it. And when I went to Barry Town, it was like another opportunity, and I got to play in the Champions League. I remember playing Porto in front of like 60,000 people in the Champions League for Barry Town. And I think I was earning 300 quid a week. And I was playing against Deco, who went on to play for Chelsea. He was probably earning tens of thousands a week. So football brought me some amazing memories. I traveled to so many places, and I met wonderful people I'm still very good friends with today. And I look back on my career, very grateful that I even had the opportunity to represent my country and to become a professional football player. I'm very proud of that. Of course, it didn't go where I wanted it to. Anybody that's at that level has the dream to become a Premier League football player, because you feel that you're in and amongst it. It just wasn't my calling. And the way I've looked at it over the years, it just wasn't my calling. I wasn't good enough, or I would have made it. Or something wasn't right, also I would have made it. I wasn't good enough. I didn't make it. So what can I do with the rest of my life? And that transition was really tough, because all you've ever known is to play football as a kid. And I went to Lilleshall from the age of 14 to 16 with the likes of Jamie Carragher, Michael Owen, Wes Brown, Jody Morris, Mark Gower. Tommy Coulshaw has now rejuvenated his career and got into coaching. He's a coach at Aston Villa with Steven Gerrard and been with them at Rangers. So there's lots of guys that was in that era with me that didn't go to levels and starting to come back into different areas, which is amazing in sport still. So that transition of, right, I'm a footballer. No, you're not a footballer. You're just Luke. And that was a big personal identity crisis for me, because I think as a young sportsman, you are the sportsman. I was Luke, the footballer, and now I was Luke. And I had no idea who Luke was, because my confidence come from, I'm a footballer. Because people like you. People like you. When you're a footballer, people want to talk to you, ask you about sport. And, so straight away, it was like, I guess my own insecurities was hidden by the title of being a footballer. Strip me back of the footballer, I'm now just Luke Staton. Who is he? And it took me a long time to kind of find that out. I was very angry. I started to self-sabotage the way that I was living my life. Weekends, I wasn't living correctly. I was playing semi-professional football, but really inside it was like somebody died. And anybody says to me, what did it feel like? And honestly, it felt like I'd lost somebody and I was devastated, but I couldn't grieve about it because I hadn't lost anybody.
Yeah.
It was literally, I'd lost my football career. My football career was over really as a football professional. And I felt sick. I felt just devastated. It was so hard to deal with. And I never ever looked at anybody else with, which I'm grateful for, with resentment or bitterness because they made it. I was always still watching and supporting them and so proud of the guys that I knew of how well they did. And of course, there was moments when I thought I was close to that. But I'd soon snap myself out of it because I used to look at it and go, do you know what? For anybody to get to that level, you've got to be great. And they're great and I wasn't. So I'm okay with that. I'm now going to live the life that I'm going to live and just be appreciative that I can take the skills that I've learned from football and sport into something different. And I always say this now, that I never believed that I would be doing what I do now. When I was playing football, it was like, that's it. And I just think that I managed to take my same effort, the energy and the enthusiasm, because I love football. I was the kid at any level. If that ball went out of play and we're chasing the game, I was sprinting after that ball to get it back on the pitch. And I still play vets football now. So if we're losing, I still want to win. It's in my DNA. I love it. I will chase that ball. I'll get it back on the pitch. And I was just so enthusiastic. And I just thought to myself, well, I did well at football to a level through being enthusiastic and never giving up and working really hard. I wonder if I could just apply that to something else. And I guess that's what I've done without knowing it. When I look back, I guess my work ethic of wanting more from life has always been there. I was always brought up with my mum and dad. My mum always used to say to me, whatever you do, son, don't live your life like me and your dad. That was her words. And although that sounds sad, it was really empowering to me because she wasn't feeling sorry for the life that she'd lived. She was saying, me and your dad didn't have anything, didn't have things, couldn't go on holiday. And if you want them things, son, you've got to go and get it. Like, if you want to live a life that brings you certain things, go and do it. Don't live like us, that you just settle and just stay in your comfort zone, really, is what she was saying. And just live average for a long time.
Yeah.
Because people where I'm from and lots of areas, you grow up in a society that you copy what everybody else does. And if your dad did that or your mum does that, it's easy to follow. Where my family was very supportive of my football. My football gave me an opportunity to see something greater than I'd ever seen, to be around people I would have never have met, to go to places. So I finished football and I thought, I still want to achieve things, it's just not going to be in sport.
Wow, that's amazing. And you mentioned there, like, your skills that you learned from playing football and you wanted to translate that into something afterwards. So what are your like transferable skills that you've taken from, say, football to doing kind of the things that you're doing now?
One of the greatest ones, something that I'm doing a lot of work on trying to pass the skill on, really, is I think just the power of being able to have a great conversation with someone. I know this is very one-sided because it's a podcast, and I usually like to ask the questions and listen because I know what I know and I know my story. I want to learn from the people I'm talking to.
Yeah.
I think the art of having conversation isn't as strong as it used to be for various reasons of mobile phones, social media, and all the different platforms that you can have conversations without actually sitting next to someone and talking. So when I was 10 years of age or 11, I remember getting dropped off at Derby County Football Ground to go on trial. I always remember at the weekend, my mum took me to the market to buy a bag to take with me. She brought me this big, massive green bag. It was about £2, this bag. And I always remember putting my mum folding all my stuff, putting in this green bag. And also I'm 10, 11, and it's half term. So football in half term, if you're going on trial, it's usually Monday to Friday. So my mum and dad dropped me off at Derby County training ground on the Monday morning. And basically I walk into this training camp, and it's not like it is now with all the fancy place. It was like a Derby County Football Club. Their training ground was, it looked like a massive porter cabin. So I walk in, I'm sat down, and I've got my green bag. My mum and dad introduced me to the coach, and then see you in 5 days, son. And I'm like, yeah, see you later, dad. See you, mum. No mobile phones to check in or anything. So I'm sat there all on my own with my green bag by my feet. The coach has said hello and left me to it. And I look around the room, and you've just got all these lads that know each other. And I didn't know anybody. And at that time, Peter Shilton, Dean Saunders, Mark Wright, people that are watching this that are football backgrounds will remember Derby County when it was in the Premier League, when they had that really great team, and Archie Cox and Roy McFarlane was the manager, and Peter Shilton was obviously the England goalkeeper at the time. And I'm sat there, and these guys are like heroes of mine that I've watched on telly. Now I'm in this place. They're drinking the pints of milk after training. You've got all these young kids chatting, and I knew nobody at all. And I'm thinking, I've got 5 days with these guys. So it's time to get changed. We go and get changed, and then we start playing football. And as we start playing football, I was pretty good. So after like 15, 20 minutes, and you're playing 5-a-side and 2 teams on, 2 teams off, I'm sat down, and it's crazy how I remember this now as I'm talking to you. So it's like 30 odd years later, 32 years later. This kid sat next to me, goes, "What's your name, then? Where are you from?" And then I would say, "Oh, I'm Luke from such and such." And because I impressed playing football, they then wanted to come and talk to me. And as they come to talk to me, I would then talk back to them. And because I had 5 days on my own with all these people, and I was actually staying at the coach's house for 5 days with him and his wife and his daughter that I'd never met before. You just learn to communicate, because if you don't communicate, you can't ask for a drink, a bite to eat. You know, you can't ask, "Can I ring my mum on the landline?" And that just became my life. From a young age, I was taken to places, dropped off, and see you later in a week's time, son. So the only way to get around is to get to know people and get to talk. I was going on trains at a young age and finding my way to training football. And so I think I just learned to communicate with people from all different backgrounds at a young age, which then stood me in good stead, because what I noticed when I came out of football, I felt that I could speak to people from sport, and then I had enough about me to speak to people from business and say, "What do you do?" and learn from them. And I started to make friends with new people and get around new people and meet people that inspired me and I admired for how they was as a person and their accomplishments. And I just learned to communicate with people. So I would say my biggest skill that I learned through sport was communication, because on the pitch, you've got to communicate. Off the pitch, you've got to communicate. You're meeting new people from all different walks of life and different cultures. You can learn to take a joke, because there's lots of jokes in football. You can learn to give a few bits of jokes too. So you can learn that banter, as they call it. And I think that was my biggest learning, was out of sport, the ability to be able to communicate effectively was one of my biggest skills. And then the characteristics that sport teaches of rejection. I'd gone through a lot of rejection. So because of the rejection that I'd faced, I then knew how to overcome it in my life. When I faced something again, I was like, well, I've been here before. So like I said to you at the beginning of the call, the choice to think of something in a certain way to get a better outcome is far better than sitting there worried or feeling fearful of something that may never happen. So, or worrying about things that you can't do anything about. And so the ability to communicate to different people, and I think to overcome adversity from what sport taught me, and to work together with people, because in sport, every man on that team would sacrifice themselves for the win, for the team, without question. And what I noticed when I came out of sport, the business world was very different. The business world didn't have that mentality. And I used to say to businesses, naively, I just used to say, imagine if your business was like a sports team, that everybody was in it for the same reason, to win, to do well and win, and to enjoy it together and have that camaraderie. And business people, you say, yeah, but it's different to sport. And all of a sudden, the odd business would say to me, how do you think you create that then? I said, well, this is how I feel you could create it. And then before you knew it, I started to deliver talks, sessions, seminars, working with groups of people in the business world of how I felt from my experiences and what I'd seen now in the outside world of how to get people to work more effectively together to work towards a common goal.
Yeah, that's massive. I can resonate with so many things that you mentioned there, especially when you said about just being dropped off at a certain location and not seeing your parents or family for 3 or 4 days. And then you have to just come out of your shell. You have to introduce yourself. You have to go and ask for that drink, or otherwise you just sit there and everyone's looking at you thinking, well, who's this guy? Like, and again, an easy way into that interaction is to play well at your chosen sport, because people will then naturally say, oh, who's he? I'm going to go and introduce myself because he looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And that happened to me so many times. So, yeah, it's just funny because nowadays, kids listening, they'll be thinking, well, just FaceTime or just call. It's like, you couldn't do it back then. No, that's massive. And obviously, with that situation with your transition and things, and you kind of at a young, vulnerable age still, 21, 22, did you get any help at all? Like, not necessarily from family, but any kind of ex-athletes or organisations within sport? Did anyone try and assist you with any kind of help after
that? Probably me pausing is the answer, and the answer is really no. So, and even family, family didn't really help me because they didn't know how to. So, it's a different thing from your family knowing that they love you and they support you to being able to help you out of a place that's not very good. So I'd gone from living a dream to what I felt was living a nightmare. And I know there's lots of people in many worse situations than I was. Let put it in the grand scheme of things. Being a football player, then not being one, it's not the end of the world. But when it's been your life forever, it feels like it. And although some people might say, well, Luke, there's people dying and you're still alive, and you're like, yeah, I know, I get that. But at that time, it's very difficult to feel that because you're just so disappointed. And I felt that I'd let my family down. I felt that my parents was just more devastated than me. And they had to deal with, what's Luke doing now? How come he's not playing football anymore? And it was constant questions about what had gone wrong, really. Because I'd gone from this up and coming, superstar that's got a 4-year contract at the Premier League champions to now carrying bricks on a local building site. People ask questions, and it was really difficult for me when I would even visit my grandparents to sit there, and I used to dread it of, what are you thinking of doing now? And I could sense they was devastated for me, and I felt devastated for the whole thing, and it was just horrible because I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know what I could do. Yeah. I didn't know what opportunities there were for somebody like me. I left school with 0 GCSEs. I'm not proud of that. It's just a fact. I remember I got a U in English. That's how bad my academic performance was. So now I'm in my early 20s carrying bricks for minimum wage and just thinking, what am I going to do? Because I've got no job skills. I've never done anything other than play football. I've got no qualifications to put on my CV. What am I going to do? And I didn't have any answers. And I can always remember just feeling that like deflated energy. And I was always a very passionate and energetic person. But by now I'm just thinking, where is this going to go for me?
Yeah.
And I remember probably one of the times that I really wanted help. I got into an altercation once, probably the only other time in my life outside of the sporting environment. I got in an altercation once on a night out. And I remember having to speak to somebody after that. They was like kind of asking my side of the story and what had happened. And as I'm sat there in this room, a lady looked at me and said, "You used to be a footballer, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I was." And she went, "Okay, what happened?" And I'm like, "I just didn't make it." I'm repeating the same stuff again.
Yeah.
And bringing the same emotions back. So she said, "Okay." She said, "How do you feel about that?" She said, "Do you ever feel angry?" And I wanted to say, "Yeah." I remember it and I can remember it so vividly. I wanted to say, "Yeah, like I do. Please help me remove this feeling. Please just help me." And I just said, "No." I said, "No, I don't." And if she'd have asked one more time, and said, is there any time when you showed anger? Is there any time when you felt, really unhappy? And I would have been saying, yeah, actually.
Yeah.
And I think she could have got me to say, I would like to have a bit of help. But as regards football, I heard nothing from nobody really, other than ex-teammates of how you doing. And lots of them disappeared just because you're in different worlds. Nobody's fault. You're just in a different path.
Yeah.
And it was like 1 minute you feel like you're on top of the world and all these coaches and managers love you, and the next minute you don't hear from anybody. And that's not their fault either. It's because they've got a new group of young people to look after. So I'm not blaming them for not doing it. I'm just being very honest and saying I got no help.
Yeah.
The help that I did get, I got £1,500 from the PFA to help me pay some bills.
Okay.
And then also, which was amazing thing, is the PFA funded an educational course for me to become a fitness trainer. I wanted to do personal fitness training. They funded 75% of my course for me, and that changed my life really, because they funded that course for me. I did that course over a 3-month period, and then it gave me something to put my focus on. It gave me a purpose again. It gave me something to work towards, whereas I was just kind of surviving at best at times. I mean, there was times, Danny, that, and there was times when I remember literally I'd be on the motorway, drive my car, and I used to see a bridge. I used to just think, if I just turn into that now, that'd be it. Like if I just hit that bridge. Now, I never felt that I would have ever done it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting here saying that I ever thought that I would have done something as severe, but the thought was there because of how unhappy I was. I just wanted it to go away, but I didn't know how to move it. I didn't know how to shift that feeling.
Yeah.
So I just blanked it out through alcohol, going out, just doing whatever I could to enjoy the moment rather than thinking about my life, because my life, I just didn't want to think about it. And then when I did that fitness training course, I started to get a purpose, and I realized the power of having a purpose. And like I said to you at the beginning of this call, to wake up every day being healthy enough and fit enough and energized enough to pursue a life that I love of helping others. I'm very privileged and honored and proud to be able to do that. And this has took 20 years to go from that kid I'm talking about that was lost to the person that you see sat here today. It's a real tough thing. And I know now football clubs do such wonderful things to help the young footballers that do get released, because it's very traumatic. Recently, I've heard a number of stories of players that was in my era that didn't make it, that are now not doing so well mentally and abiding by the law too, which is really sad to hear, because it's tough. It's tough to overcome that rejection and to go again.
Yeah.
Lots of my friends that was in a similar position, I know it still haunts them to this day, 20 years later. Still haunts them. And it's funny, Danny, I still have dreams of being a footballer. When I'm asleep dreaming, I'm at night asleep and I'm dreaming like that kid again of scoring and playing football. And I'm dreaming of being a Premier League football player. And I wake up and I know it's not real, and I'm okay with that. But to still have them dreams, it's still within your DNA. I'm still a competitor. I still want to win. I still want to challenge myself. It's in my DNA. It's just in a different line of work now.
Sure. And obviously, with all of that in mind, obviously, you mentioned you got elements of help and your situation, and obviously everyone goes through, well, I'd say everyone that has a situation where they've been released or they're kind of got injured and it's just curtailed their career sooner than kind of they expected, and they go through that period. Luckily for me, it didn't happen that way, but for the most part, people's experiences are pretty much the same. I mean, with that in mind, do you think retirement should be approached in a different way? So I'm talking about when you start your YTS or apprenticeship, whatever they call it nowadays, and then you go through your career, and then obviously some people go on to make it, some people make it, and then they have to fall out of the game, and some people have longevity in the game, and there's different elements within that to obviously like come to that particular outcome. So do you, with that in mind and all those different facets that I've mentioned, do you think that retirement should be approached in a different way? So what I mean by that is, when I was playing, certainly, we're kind of from the same era or similar, you're a few years older than me, it was always seen in a negative light. It was like, oh, I don't want to think about that day. Like, I just want to continue trying to play for as long as possible, or I'm trying to make it. I'm 18. I'm not thinking about retiring. That's like years away. So I know there was courses and things that we could attend at that point, but the courses that they used to tell you to attend as an apprentice, there was kind of NVQs and things like that. So there was no kind of substance to it really. So they were always kind of dismissed. It was more of a day off and things like that for the players. So there's, I mean, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it should be approached in a different way?
Yeah, I think the word retirement just gives you a wrong perspective of what potential you have after playing football. So when somebody says what you're going to do after you retire, it makes you feel like you're finished. And yes, you may be stopping doing one thing, but you're not retired. You've got a whole life ahead of you. And I think the terminology is, I can never see myself retiring now from what I do. I can see myself maybe doing other things in different ways, but to retire means to stop. And when you say you're retiring from football, yes, you are stopping playing football, but it's like, how can you focus on what you're going to do rather than what's stopping? And I think lots of footballers are fearful of that day because they haven't had the opportunity with anybody or themselves to actually create a space to think what comes next. And I think if it was addressed earlier of what do you want your life to look like when you do stop playing football and you go to do something else, lots of footballers, and I was one of them, didn't give that question the time of day because it never felt real. It never felt that it would happen to you. At some point, it happens to everybody because of age, of course. And if you've financially done really well, the pressures are slightly different. It's now, how do I replace that buzz, that adrenaline, that winning mentality? It's not about needing money, where mine was needing money and to replace the competitiveness. I think people that do really well financially still have the same still have challenges, maybe slightly different because of their financial position. However, they still get like Ricky Hatton at boxing, these guys, Sugar Ray Leonard, sports people that perform at a high level, no matter how much money they've got, will still have challenges after sport because of how important and how obsessed they are at being great at it. My view would be, Danny, and I'm just thinking out loud, would be when you're going through football, it's about what do you want your life to look like when you're older? What do you want your life to be like when you're in your mid-30s and 40s? What kind of lifestyle do you want to live? And that helps you do better things with your money today for tomorrow. And what kind of education do you need to do today that when you're older, you could then enhance the skills that you've learned in sport in conjunction with someone else? I always remember at Blackburn Rovers, a player called Stuart Ripley, who was a Premier League champion. When he was playing in games, I was sat on the bus with him a few times, a few seats away from him in a reserve game. And when everybody's just sat there chilling and chatting, he was studying. And I think he went on to be a solicitor. So back then it wasn't as often. I think now people are starting to think a little bit more, what could I do with my life? Because it's not about what can I do so much to earn money. It's what can I do to fulfill myself and enjoy my life after sport. So I would say that retirement would be more, rather than looking at what you're going to do when you retire, it's what would you want your life to look like when football's no longer with you? What would you like to do? What are your passions? What do you enjoy outside of sport? Because there might be other things that you enjoy that you want to start to get your skill set, because every footballer has time to upskill themselves outside of football and sport. And I think it's a healthy thing to do that too, for their own dynamic way of learning and learning how to take on board messages. I think it helps you be a better footballer when you're learning about other aspects of life too, whether it's business, finance, personal development, whatever it is. I think learning outside of football helps you football short term as well. I also think it helps you long term as well, be able to go, do you know what? I'm not scared of that day coming. I'm not going to ignore it because I'm having conversations about what it'll look like. I'm actually inspired about what I could achieve after football, whether it's property or whatever it is, whether it's community work. But too often, football players avoid that conversation because they've got no idea and it's scary.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And again, that's some amazing kind of bits of advice in that. And anyone listening, it would be good to obviously take heed of that, because I do think even if you haven't physically got something to maybe transition into, it's worthwhile preparing yourself mentally. I think that's one of the things that I always had from the age of 23, 24. I was like, well, if I don't make enough to then give me more options when I'm older, then I'm going to have to work. So I always had that train of thought, and that didn't distract me from trying to make it as high as possible. It was always a case of, right, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, I'm prepared to work. And that doesn't mean to say I was prepared to do anything, because obviously you always want to have a sustainable, respectable career and things like that. But it was a case of, okay, well, I understand that when I get to 35, if I'm lucky enough to play that long or whatever it is, I'm going to have to work. So I do believe to this day that that train of thought always assisted me going forward anyway. You mentioned earlier
What age
about,
was you? What age was you, Danny, when football was no more?
so I retired when I was 31, and that was just my choice. So physically, I still think I could play now because I'm that body type that doesn't put any weight on. In fact, I've actually lost weight. I've lost so much muscle mass since I stopped playing, and I can kind of eat what I want to, if that makes sense. But yeah, I retired at 31. I was at a crossroads. I finished playing in Iceland, so we played Europa League football out there. We won the league, and I played at a decent level. So it's like top end League One, bottom end Championship level over there.
Yeah.
And I came back to England on a high, and I was thinking, okay, well, I know I can play at that level. So let's see what England has to offer me. And then it just, as you know, you speak to people, it's like, oh yeah, come in on trial and this and that. And I just thought, if you don't know me by now and I'm 31 years old, what chance have I got? I'm not coming on trial for 4 or 5 weeks for them to be offered peanuts, or for them for that to turn into maybe a 2-month trial. And I've been and done that before, and I wasn't prepared to do it. So I always said in my head at a young age, kind of, if I could transition into something that I thought was sustainable, that I enjoyed, then I would do it if I thought the time was right. So then I started looking for roles elsewhere, and then, like I said, I fell into a state agency, and then had 7.5 years in that particular field. Then I moved on from there, and now I'm doing other things as well. So yeah, so for me, that was, I think, because it was my own choice, I think that made my transition a little bit more seamless than, say, if it wasn't my choice, if that makes sense. So yeah, for me, it's, I don't think there's any right or wrong. Everyone's got their own kind of transition story, and there's elements of kind of everyone's within everyone's as well. But it just depends on the situation and you as a personality and your family background and dynamics. And I was never really in that football bubble, so I always had my secure kind of core friendship group outside of football that I always socialised with. So I was always one of the boys, if that makes sense. So it didn't. I never portrayed myself as Danny the footballer. Whereas I know that I did have certain people who I was aware of who did used to come across in that type of way. And again, it is what it is. Everyone's different, aren't they? So it just depends on who you are as a person, really. But I mean, going forward, you mentioned earlier about Lillishall, and obviously that's where our connection is, because I attended Lillishall, although I was a few years younger than you. So, like, how was your time at Lillishall, and who was in your group at that time?
Yeah, it was a wonderful time. Loved it. Still got friends to this day from there all those years ago. So in my year group, Jody Morris, who went on to be the youngest ever player to play for Chelsea's boyhood club, and we're still great friends today. And I play in the same football team as him now. We're both 43, and we're playing together in the same team, a vets team in London, which is just brilliant to still be on that pitch. We don't move as well as we did, and we don't fly into tackles as much as we used to, but we still fall into that competitive arena when we're on that pitch. Within that group as well, a guy who's still a very good friend to this day, Tommy Coulshaw, who he didn't go on to fulfill his dream of being. He was at Liverpool, got released from Liverpool. It didn't go to the levels that he wanted to. Reinvented himself as a coach, became Liverpool under-16s coach, I think it was. Steven Gerrard then comes in and takes him up to from under-16s to under-18s with Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard then goes to Rangers, takes him with him, and then to Villa. So he's followed a different path to stay in football. And within my group, there was a guy called Michael Branch, who was, again, he broke into the Everton first team very young. I think he was England under-21s. Very sad when I heard quite a few years ago that he'd been sent to prison for being involved in drugs, and it was like, crikey, one minute he's playing for Everton at the age of 17 or 18, and next minute it seems to go so fast that he went down the wrong path. And I was gutted when I heard that, because it shows the trauma that you go through from being a young footballer with the world at your feet to then you're not a footballer anymore, and you get lost and you don't know what to do, and you've still got the financial commitments to yourself and your loved ones, and you end up falling into the wrong world. And I just hope he's doing okay now. And so also in my year group was like Mark Gower, went on to play for Swansea. And the year above was Jamie Carragher, who became a big star. Ronnie Walwork, who also after football had his challenges as well with certain wrongdoings. And the year below me was Michael Owen and Wes Brown. So they're kind of and Michael Ball as well, who played for Everton and Rangers. So we had a really good hardcore group of lads that went on to do, like, they're the names that I'm thinking will be most recognisable that people may have heard of. And I'm still in touch. I took Wes Brown recently into a school with me in Manchester.
Yeah.
So as I said to you earlier, I've got a real passion for helping the next generation, helping our children follow their dream. And I was in a school in Manchester, and the day before I dropped Wes Brown a WhatsApp, and he said, yeah, I'll come with you. So he came with me in this school. It was amazing, mate. It was like Wes Brown walked in and the whole place just was like wild, because he's from the same streets as them. So what I want to do is I want to take real success stories. And that's not just about money. That's about people that have gone from nowhere to somewhere great. And there's lots of learning there for everybody to take in that. And I don't see success just as money. Success, yes, is a commercial evidence that you've been successful in a venture potentially.
Yeah.
However, success for me is, are you a great person? What are you giving to the world? Are you looking after people around you? How will people speak of you when you're not in the room? And Wes Brown is certainly one of them characters that I've always admired, because he's always been so humble and down to earth. And he came into that school and the kids absolutely loved it. It was just magic. So one of the benefits of being from the football world as a youngster is that I've got friends still that have gone on to do really well that will support some of the work that I do, like that. Jody Morris got me an opportunity to go and do some work at Chelsea when I did some work with the youth team there. And so you become lifelong friends of these people. Tommy Culshaw invited me to Glasgow Rangers. I go to watch Glasgow Rangers in the Champions League, and the next minute I'm saying hello to Steven Gerrard that, we kicked lumps out of each other 20 odd years ago in the youth team. And he's like, hey, Luke, how you doing? And it just really nice. Such great people. And my time there was just, I learned so much, obviously living away from home at such a young age. I wasn't one of those that ever got homesick. I just loved playing football every day. I loved being around teammates and friends. We got to have great experiences. As you know yourself that you got to do things that you would have never have done at that age if you was at home. What was your view on Littleshall? How did you find it?
I loved it. I was pretty much the same as you. I mean, the core group of players there. So in my year, most notable names would have been Francis Jeffers and Scott Parker and Stuart Taylor, the goalkeeper who played for Arsenal. They're the ones that are kind of more so household names. But we had a good core group. And I think how you've mentioned it there in terms of your group, I think when I joined, I think you would have left, because the year above me was Michael Owen and Wes Brown.
We did,
So again, every day just seeing how Michael Owen carried himself, and we always knew there's always someone or a couple of people that you think they're going to make it, and Michael Owen and Wes Brown were those two that I always thought, yeah, you're going to make it. There's obviously people in that group like Kenny Lunt as well, but I didn't really get home. I didn't get homesick. I just loved being there. I mean, there was elements where you'd think, okay, well, what are my friends doing at home, and what's mum and dad doing, and that, and brothers and sisters. But you soon snap out of it, because, as you know, the banter and stuff, and there was always something to do, playing snooker or whatever it is, going to the cinema and stuff. So it was crazy, because moving away from home, and although it wasn't that far, at 14, if you're 20, 25 minutes away from your home, that's quite far. And I think it was about an hour and a half drive for me, because it was in Shropshire. So the whole experience, the whole living quarters and training every day and just playing against other teams and just absolutely beating everyone out there. We went to the Nordic Cup and we won that. So that was amazing. And everyone knows that when you join Lilleshall, the first thing you talk about is you need to win the Nordics, because we've all won it as the senior players. So, and then the year below me was like Joe Cole. And, so it was just amazing time for me. Really enjoyed it, and like you said, you make kind of friends for life. So yeah, really good, really good. Going forward, then, just to bring it to a close, have you got any advice for any athletes out there? I'm talking athletes from any age. It doesn't necessarily have to be football either. So, what would your advice be with regards to approaching like retirement from sport?
My advice would be to any sportsman that's approaching a new chapter is to look at it like it's a new chapter rather than its retirement. So I didn't find the words earlier when I was trying to articulate it when you asked me about retirement, but it's just come to me now that I think of it as it's just the next chapter in your book, and it can be as magnificent as the last one, or even more so if you choose it to be. So if I was to give 3 key bits of advice to any sportsman coming towards the end of one chapter going into another would be, number 1, look at it like it's the next chapter and make it as exciting as you possibly can to help you with the transition. Number 2, take note of all the great skills that you've learned and attributes that you've developed and characteristics throughout your sporting career, and write them all down and be aware of how great you are as a human being, not just as a sportsman, but how great you are as a human being, because sometimes we take our confidence from what we achieved in the sport. However, there's so much to learn from the person that you've become through the sporting journey. And the third thing would be to get around great people that are doing things in all different walks of life. That might be people that were sports people now gone on to something else, or it might be people that have never played sport that have gone on to do great things in all different walks of life, teaching, coaching, business, doctors, nurses. Just speak to people that you look at and go, do you know what? I like what they're doing, and I like how they come across. I'm going to get to know them and get to know people outside of your circle that expand your knowledge of life and wisdom. And one of the greatest things that I personally have done over the last 20 years, or 15 years for sure, is to be brave enough to go to places, to meet people that made me feel out my depth, but then eventually got to feel like I deserved to be in their presence and their company because I had some value to offer to them. Whereas in the early days, I just thought, I want to be around people that are doing great things. How do I get around them though? Because I'm not doing great things. Or maybe I need to learn a way to do great things. And I thought, well, let me just watch and observe these people. So I'll just go to places that would mean I would get to meet someone that I looked at as if to say, wow, they're doing great. And then I'll just be myself and say, hello, how are you? And what are you doing, Luke? Well, I'm a fitness trainer now and I used to play sport. Okay. What sport was it? So I used to engage in conversations with people that I felt at that point was extending my knowledge of life, because all I'd ever known was football. But I needed to know more of life now, about business, about all different things. So my 3 tips would definitely be, number 1, see it as the next chapter and make it magnificent. Number 2, be aware of all the skills, characteristics and attributes that you've gained from being an athlete, sportsman, and be proud of what you've been and what you've accomplished as a person. And the third thing would be to surround yourself with people that grow your mind to something great so it never returns to its normal size. And once you have them conversations with new people, it's amazing what it can do for you in your life.
Amazing. Great stuff. And I've really enjoyed the chat. Obviously, well, we will keep in touch afterwards because obviously we mentioned offline that we want to obviously discuss and see how things can pan out going forward. So we'll definitely do that. Really appreciate your time today. Obviously, I know you need to drop your kids' books off as well. So I don't want to keep you any longer. Just quickly, if you can just promote again where we can find you on the socials, like what you actually do, and then obviously people can then potentially link up with yourself going forward.
Yeah, so the easiest places to find me is at Luke Staton with the number 1 at the end. So at Luke Staton 1, that's on Instagram and Twitter. Facebook's Luke Staton, LinkedIn Luke Staton, and my website's just luke@lukestaton.com. www.lukestaton.com. So I think you type in a name nowadays, you can find people anywhere if you really want to. And I just want to say, Danny, thank you so much to you for the opportunity to speak to you. And if anybody's listened to this, I appreciate you listening. If you have, and you have any feedback or anything that's relatable, please feel free to reach out to us for a conversation, because conversation is where the magic lives. And I think it's something that we don't put enough emphasis on of having conversations with like-minded people from all different walks of life. So thank you, Danny, for the opportunity to come and speak to you. And I really want to ask you lots of stuff. And I know that isn't what this podcast was for, but I can feel myself wanting to say, what happened at 31? What did you do next? And where did you go? So maybe we could reverse the roles and I could get you onto my podcast, the From Nowhere to Somewhere podcast. I could bring you on there as a guest so I can get to find out a lot more about you, because often our conversation one-on-one would be lots of stuff that's fine for everybody to listen to anyway. So maybe we do that as an idea and people can get the opportunity to listen to you that does all this great work that you're doing after football and how you transitioned and what you're going to do with your podcast next. So Danny, appreciate your time and thanks for bringing me on, and all the listeners, thanks for listening too.
Awesome. Sounds like a plan. We'll definitely sort that out. Really appreciate your time and thanks for obviously coming on. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, my friend. Thank you,
Thanks,
Danny.
Luke.